Hello, I'm Elise Vance, the author of the channel Borrowed Lives, and I offer you fascinating stories. Like and subscribe to my channel.
My coldly distant, high-ranking magistrate husband believed he had secured a marriage with the family's soft-spoken, obedient star architect. The minor flaw in his master plan was that I wasn't her. I was the black sheep restorer from the docks, forced into this gilded cage to replace my fleeing sister. And the very morning he unexpectedly started perceiving my innermost thoughts, he caught me offering a sweet, serene smile while internally reflecting impressive posture, sculpted jaw, absolutely zero human warmth. What a tragic waste of expensive bespoke tailoring. I placed the breakfast tray onto Judge Harrison Vance's dark oak desk using both hands, kept my eyes dutifully lowered, and maintained the demure, decorative expression expected of the daughter sold to settle a family dispute. Your breakfast is served, my dear husband. Do enjoy it, you handsome block of solid granite. If your face wasn't carved like a museum artifact, I would have sent you back to the Ministry of Justice with a formal return request. Harrison went motionless. Not a slight freeze, a complete shutdown. His silver fountain pen hovered right over a legal document, his piercing frost-blue eyes rising slowly from the parchment to lock onto me, looking as if I had just casually admitted to a grand robbery in mid-sentence. I maintained the smile. Masking complete internal panic with absolute tranquility happened to be my greatest survival skill. Smiling while my soul desperately searched for an emergency exit. Is the coffee not to your liking, husband? Please don't choke on your pride. I still require 6 months of living allowance and an unconditional separation agreement. The heavy pen slipped from his fingers and rolled across the desk. I blinked with perfect, innocent surprise. Should I fetch a medic? Harrison slowly surveyed the private study. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the fog-draped harbor stretched into the gray morning. Standing near the bookshelf, his chief clerk remained still as a statue, clearly debating whether Supreme Court judges were allowed to drop writing tools or if this signaled an international crisis. Harrison's stare snapped back to me. His composure returned, but his eyes were dangerously alive. Leave us. Now. The clerk evaporated from the room so quickly I felt a sudden surge of professional respect. I folded my hands over my linen dress. Would you care for fresh tea? A personality? A genuine hobby? A fleeting heartbeat of human empathy? I could contact domestic staff to locate one. Harrison's jaw tightened. Oh, absolute disaster. His gaze sharpened into pure focus. No, this is mathematically impossible. Could he actually hear me? No, that was beyond absurd. Powerful men like Harrison Vance barely listened when people screamed directly at them. Reading minds would require a basic interest in other human beings. He leaned back into his heavy leather chair, his movements calculated. Corinne. My pulse spiked, then instantly betrayed me by secretly liking how my actual name sounded when he spoke it. He wasn't supposed to call me Corinne. In this residence, I was Genevieve Vance, celebrated designer, flawless bride, a high society lie wrapped in cashmere. I promptly corrected him out loud. Genevieve, husband. His eyes narrowed to slits. Inside, I executed a flawless mental facepalm. Outstanding work, Corinne. Next time, just stamp identity fraud across your forehead and save everyone the suspense. Harrison rested his long fingers against the desk's wooden grain. What sort of gift would you prefer today? I blinked. A gift? Yes. For what landmark occasion? Does a legal spouse require an occasion? Out loud, I offered a soft, submissive tilt of my head. Simple garden herbs or wild flowers would be more than enough. Flowers? I want full access to the offshore reserve funds, an unmarked boat, and enough liquid capital to recover from this ridiculous marriage. Ideally, a secluded coastal cottage where nobody carrying my family surname is legally permitted to breathe. Harrison's stoic face didn't betray a single emotion, but his right hand slowly closed into a tight fist. I swallowed hard. There is absolutely no way. Zero chance. He glanced briefly toward the double doors. Inform the courier to grant my wife unrestricted access to the estate vault. And bring round the dark teal roadster from the private carriage house. My brain went entirely blank, followed immediately by a chaotic spark. He is either a street mentalist, completely possessed by maritime ghosts, or wealthy enough to make pure chance illegal. The corner of Harrison's mouth almost twitched. Almost. I stared back at him, maintaining the composure of a porcelain statue having a full existential crisis. How remarkably generous, husband. How thoroughly terrifying, husband. Should I draw a line of salt across the bedroom doorway? Summon a local priest? Ask the roadster if it also receives my internal monologue. His eyes dropped back to his documents. Join me for breakfast. I took a seat, mainly because basic survival usually looked like compliance in high-ceilinged rooms. And that was precisely how my husband began hearing every single thought that crossed my mind. I never received a proper scientific breakdown of the phenomenon. Harrison dropped vague hints about the centuries-old signet ring passed down through his family line. My best friend, Nora, claimed it was cosmic retaliation for my bad choices. I personally blamed the universe for accidentally connecting the most rigid magistrate in the district to the loudest internal commentary in the mansion. And that was how my existence, which was already a glorified ransom note written on formal stationery, turned into an absurdity with severe financial stakes. The following morning, Harrison stepped into the conservatory wearing a sharply cut charcoal-tailored coat instead of his usual oppressive, black judicial robes. The silhouette was striking. The collar was slightly unbuttoned. His hair was arranged with the kind of calculated precision that suggested an expensive stylist had been intimidated into making a storm look fashionable. I nearly dropped my silverware. Out loud, I offered a serene smile. You look exceptionally authoritative today. Someone notify the watchman. The stone monolith has discovered style. Harrison halted near his seat. His elderly butler, who had likely spent 40 years watching the Vance family men refuse to express joy, looked utterly stunned when Harrison's lips barely twitched. Is that quiet satisfaction? Naturally it is. It's also a grave warning. If he keeps improving his appearance, I'm going to have to stop comparing him to heavy masonry. Thank you, he said smoothly, sitting down opposite me. He seemed bizarrely pleased with himself, and I deeply resented noticing it. For the next week, Harrison relentlessly tested the boundaries. He asked if I admired the classical oil paintings in the primary gallery. They are magnificent, husband. They look like a gloomy museum had a terrible accident with brown paint. Very expensive gloom, but still. By the following afternoon, every single canvas had been removed, replaced with bright maritime landscapes and open horizon watercolors. He asked if I enjoyed the head chef's roasted turnip soup. It is exquisite. It tastes like boiled regret served in a silver bowl. The turnip soup vanished from the estate menu forever. He asked whether I preferred sitting in the East Library or the West Courtyard for afternoon tea. Any spot is delightful, husband. Anywhere except the formal drawing room where Lady Vance stares at me like she can smell dockside salt through my velvet sleeves. My afternoon tea was immediately moved to the private garden greenhouse. By the 6th day, I sat in my quarters and stared out the arched window at the dark teal roadster parked in the courtyard like a shiny monument to my own shameless greed. I retrieved my hidden pocket watch communicator and dialed Nora. She picked up almost instantly. If this call is about your high society hostage arrangement, I want details. If you've committed a felony, I need to know what shoes to wear. He can read my mind, Nora. A heavy silence stretched over the line. Then, are we celebrating his unusual talent or looking for a shovel? Nora. I'm entirely serious. Did you consume strange mushrooms from the docks? No. Offend a maritime witch? I married a chief magistrate under my twin sister's legal papers. Perhaps the High Court filed an official complaint with fate. Nora hummed thoughtfully. So, the cold, emotionless judge now knows your inner voice is a feral dock cat wrapped in silk. Thank you for the profound emotional support. You're very welcome. Now use it. Use what? The mental link. You spent months playing the role of silent room decor. Now the decor has claws and telepathy. I turned my gaze toward the locked brass box under the floorboards where I kept my authentic restoration licenses and real papers, the ones my uncle and Genevieve didn't know I had secretly secured. You're suggesting I test his limits? I whispered. I'm suggesting you think of something wildly extravagant and see if his judicial ego buys it. That very afternoon, Harrison returned to the estate hours early. That fact alone was deeply suspicious. The man usually treated the High Court like his primary spouse and me like an unexpected tax deduction. He located me in the archives room, where I was pretending to study regional maps while actually calculating how many months of allowance it would take to buy back my mentor's workshop from my uncle's creditors. Harrison leaned against the marble hearth. "Are you comfortable in here, Corinne?" "Extremely, husband. I certainly have no desire for a private excursion to the mineral baths, a weekend in the coastal countryside, and an unlimited pastry cart." "Absolutely not the pastry cart. Monstrous. Tragic. Wholly unwanted." His icy gaze drifted toward me. I lifted my tea glass and presented a face of pure, angelic innocence. The very next morning, his senior clerk arrived with a sealed envelope containing reservations for a seaside estate, 3 private thermal appointments, and a master baker inquiring whether my preferences leaned toward dark cocoa or honeyed plum. I locked myself in the washroom and contacted Nora again. He took the bait. Nora shrieked through the line. I whispered intensely into the receiver, "Stop cheering. I am legally bound to a telepathic vault. Girl, flirt with the vault." I am not flirting with a man who illegally wiretapped my brain. Does the wiretap come with sapphires? I looked down at the heavy sapphire wristlet that had been delivered alongside my morning tea. "Yes," I admitted. "Then be brave and work the system." That evening, Harrison entered my private sitting room without warning. I snapped my head up. He stopped in his tracks, seemed to remember basic courtesy, took 2 paces back, and formally knocked on the open doorframe. Ridiculous man. The stone monolith has discovered door etiquette. "You may enter," I said out loud, keeping my expression entirely serene. If he actually steps across this room and kisses me right now, I might forgive 2% of his crimes against ordinary conversation. Harrison stopped directly beside my chair. His dark eyes deepened significantly. "Only 2%? The historical journal slipped from my lap and hit the rug with a dull thud. For 3 full seconds, my soul completely evacuated my body, packed its bags, and moved to another province. Then I stood up, smoothing my skirt. "You can actually hear me." He didn't bother to deny it. I crossed my arms over my chest. "How long?" His stoic silence was answer enough. "Since the breakfast tray?" I asked. The breakfast tray was innocent, he replied smoothly. "I was merely investigating." "Investigating my brain?" "It is remarkably loud." My jaw dropped. No man had ever looked so utterly unbothered while insulting me with absolute accuracy. I pointed a finger at him. "You have no legal right to judge the volume. You reside emotionally in a sealed basement." His dark brow arched slightly. "Is that your spoken judgment or your internal evaluation?" "Both. I am expanding my communication skills." For the first time since our forced marriage, Magistrate Harrison Vance actually laughed. Not a polite, formal breath, but a genuine, quiet laugh, low, startled, and dangerously warm. And I deeply hated how attractive it was. Handsome face, rapidly improving personality, still a direct threat to my peace of mind. He heard every word, of course. His smile sharpened. "Improving? High praise. Don't become arrogant," I warned. "You are still at a beginner level." "Then instruct me." "No." "Yes." I narrowed my eyes. I married a cold high judge and somehow inherited an apprentice. I married a quiet, obedient daughter and apparently secured a sharp-tongued outlaw. His mind seemed to mirror. "Technically," I said softly, "you didn't marry me." The moment those words left my mouth, the ambient temperature in the room plummeted. Harrison's faint smile completely vanished. I looked away first. There it was, the heavy lie beneath everything. I was not Genevieve. Corinne was the unwanted twin, the one banished to work at our uncle's coastal restoration yard, while the family paraded Genevieve through high society salons. Genevieve received tutors, fine silk, and grand promises. I received sawdust, salt air, and constant reminders to be grateful for my basic existence. Then Genevieve vanished 3 days before her arranged marriage to the High Magistrate, leaving a single note: I'd rather jump into the harbor than marry that cold walking ledger. Let Corinne do it. She shares my face anyway. My uncle had dragged me from the docks before dawn. My old mentor's unpaid debts were placed on the table like a loaded weapon. Sign the register. Smile. Play the part until Genevieve returns. 6 months, perhaps a year. Harrison Vance barely knows her. He'll never notice. They were right about one thing. Harrison had barely spent an hour with Genevieve. He noticed nothing until he started perceiving my thoughts. That night, I lay awake staring at the canopy ceiling, trying desperately not to think, which was like telling a sea gale to step quietly. Harrison cannot find out the truth. If he exposes the fraud, he'll annul the marriage. If he annuls it, my uncle reclaims my mentor's workshop. If my uncle gets angry, he takes everything. And if Genevieve comes back, I disappear back to the docks. A soft knock sounded at my door. I didn't answer. The handle didn't turn. He respected the boundary, and that somehow mattered more than it should have. By morning, a formal messenger delivered a sealed document to my table. The outstanding debts against my mentor's workshop had been paid in full. A new private trust had been established for the property. Authorized sole owner, Corinne. I stared at the parchment until the ink blurred. Downstairs, Harrison was sipping black tea while reviewing judicial reports, looking as if he hadn't just rewritten my entire future. I placed the document beside his cup. What is this? He didn't look up. A legal deed. I can read legalese, Harrison. Why? He closed the file. Because no family should hold a weapon over your head. My thoughts went entirely silent. Not because I had nothing to say, but because every sarcastic comment tripped over the sudden tightness in my throat. He could hear the silence too, I realized. His sharp features softened by a single degree. I know you dislike feeling indebted. You don't owe me anything, I said, trying to keep my voice flat. That isn't how money works. It is how mine works when I pass judgment. I glared at him. That was the most arrogant magistrate sentence I have ever heard. The corner of his mouth curved up. Was it effective? Unfortunately, yes. Unbearable. Attractive. I despised the ruling class. He coughed into his teacup to hide a sudden laugh. The first major gala after the mind-reading incident was hosted by the Judicial Guild. I wore emerald velvet in the role of Genevieve, which felt increasingly hollow with every passing minute. Harrison wore dark charcoal tailored formal wear, cut so precisely that every noblewoman in the Grand Hall seemed to forget how to breathe. A prominent young diplomat named Julian Vance, no direct relation, but a man who treated his own reflection like a religious icon, approached me near the marble gallery. He flashed the kind of smile that belonged on high-end soap ads and sincere public apology videos. "Mrs. Vance, you are even more exquisite in person," he purred. "Thank you," I said aloud, offering a polite tilt of my head. "Pretty. Utterly useless, most likely. But pretty." He looks like a man who has never had to open his own tin of tea in his entire life. Across the hall, Harrison's head turned sharply in my direction. I kept smiling pleasantly at the diplomat. "What do you think of the new marble relief?" Julian asked, gesturing toward the wall. His hair is impeccably groomed. His internal brain power could probably be used to polish tables. Harrison appeared right beside me. Not walked, appeared. Like pure jealousy wrapped in custom leather shoes. "My wife prefers coastal landscapes," Harrison stated smoothly. I blinked. "Do I, husband?" He looked down at me with absolute authority. "You do tonight." Julian let out a nervous laugh. Vance. Cold. Brief. As formidable as ever. Inside my head, I clapped with deliberate slowness. He's jealous. Look at that, the stone monolith actually reacts to the weather. Harrison's hand settled lightly, possessively at the small of my back. "You look tired, my dear." "I am not tired in the slightest." "You have been admiring the Teton salesman for 11 straight minutes." My polite smile nearly shattered on the spot. Julian looked utterly bewildered. "Teton salesman?" Harrison glanced at him with cool indifference. "A private legal joke." It wasn't a private joke. It was stolen directly from my skull. I brought my velvet slipper down firmly on Harrison's boot. He didn't even flinch. Hateful, immovable man. Steel-toed emotions. The corner of his lips twitched. Then Victoria Vance, Harrison's mother, swept into the hall in silver satin and diamonds, looking like an empress who had won a lawsuit against the passage of time. The crowd naturally parted before her. I braced myself internally. The terrifying mother-in-law scene. Excellent. I should probably stretch my muscles first. Victoria evaluated me from head to toe, then turned her sharp gaze onto her son. Harrison, why does your bride look like a high-value hostage trying to maintain good posture? Harrison went entirely still. I fell in love with the woman instantly. Victoria took my arm. Come with me, child. My son was raised with statutes, not charm. We must make allowances for his conversational defects. I am standing right here, mother, Harrison noted dryly. Good. Saves me the trouble of writing a letter. She led me to a quieter balcony and ordered spiced wine for me, herbal infusion for herself, and absolutely nothing for Harrison. A wife is not a piece of library furniture, Victoria advised, patting my hand. If my son acts like an absolute monarch, simply remove his throne. I stared at her, then at Harrison, then back to Victoria. I'm not entirely sure anyone has ever informed him that furniture is allowed to have an opinion. Victoria smirked. Then start with small ones. Reorganize his study. Men live in terror of rearranged books. Harrison let out a quiet sigh. Mother, please. And make sure you spend his gold, Victoria added smoothly. A bored wife becomes a dangerous wife, but an underfunded wife becomes creative. No family survives a creative woman. I smiled despite myself. Victoria's gaze sharpened, seeing right through the velvet dress. You have been far too obedient lately. My chest tightened. You don't truly know me, Lady Vance. No, but I recognize a woman who learned to survive by speaking softly in loud rooms. Harrison looked at me then, not at the fake name, not at the expensive fabric, but directly at me. My chaotic thoughts went quiet again. By the end of the week, Victoria had become my fiercest ally. She sent me 3 tailored riding coats, a comprehensive list of the Vance family's political rivals ranked by how useful they could be, and a handwritten note that read, "My son is emotionally frozen, not deceased." Strike the side of the casing firmly. Nora had the note framed. Meanwhile, Harrison quietly restructured reality behind the scenes. My monthly allowance stopped flowing into my uncle's family accounts and was redirected into a private, protected vault under my real name, Corinne. My uncle sent 7 frantic letters. Genevieve, who had been missing for nearly a year, suddenly viewed my public social announcements from a hidden ledger account. Nora tracked the trail immediately. She's returned, Nora reported from her cluttered workshop, projecting registry logs across her desk. Genevieve landed in the capital yesterday on a private coach from the southern provinces. Very dramatic timing. She must have heard the cold magistrate got an upgrade into a devoted husband. On the desk, Genevieve's old departure note seemed to glow in the lamplight. I'd rather jump into the harbor than marry that cold machine. Let Corinne do it. She was born to be useful. When I return, she can fade back into the background. I stared at that one word, fade. Such a light word for people who had never been forced to pack their entire identity into someone else's shadow. Nora squeezed my shoulder firmly. We can ruin them quietly. I smiled, a cold, dangerous edge entering my voice. No, quiet ruins are boring. I want a proper stage. Genevieve arrived at the Vance estate early the next morning. She looked remarkably like me, if I had been raised on fine linens, pastel silks, and zero survival instincts. Pale blush gown, perfectly styled curls, wide innocent eyes, and a sharp blade hidden behind polished sweetness. Corinne, she breathed softly. Harrison stood right beside me in the grand entry hall. Genevieve's eyes flickered toward him, widening slightly. He was not the rigid, unyielding magistrate she remembered from the arranged marriage contract. He was warmer now, if only with me. Impeccably dressed, remarkably alive, one heavy hand resting low near my waist as if it belonged there naturally. She visibly hated it. I came home, she whispered, stepping closer. It's time to put everything back in its proper place. I offered a serene smile. Did you bring the original receipt? Her delicate expression tightened. You've had your little illusion. My life, my husband, my estate. I glanced up at Harrison. Did she just refer to you as her property? Should I file a formal complaint with the High Court? Harrison's voice was dangerously calm. I am entirely satisfied with my current occupant. Genevieve flinched as if struck. Magnificent. My uncle and aunt summoned me to their town residence that afternoon. I went because Nora had hidden a voice recording talisman inside my coat collar, and because Harrison flatly refused to let me step into that snake pit alone. He waited in his closed carriage right outside the gates, his idea of giving me space, while actively preparing to level their financial empire. The room smelled of heavy incense and old deceit. My aunt sat beside Genevieve, patting her hand soothingly. My uncle stood by the cold fireplace like a judge who had misplaced his authority. You will step aside without making a scene, my uncle commanded. Genevieve has returned. How touching, I replied. Should I applaud or notify the local pest controllers? My aunt's lips thinned. Do not be coarse. I was raised by your family line, aunt. Blame the source material. Genevieve's eyes welled with practice tears. Corinne, I simply needed time to find myself. I was terrified. You knew this swap was supposed to be temporary, I noted smoothly. So why did temporary suddenly end the moment Harrison opened an unrestricted vault in my name? Her tears abruptly paused. My uncle slammed his hand against the mahogany table. Enough. You were a nobody working the salt docks before we brought you into this hall. We granted you the privilege of living like Genevieve. You handed me her golden cage and tried to bill me for the rent, I corrected coldly. My aunt leaned forward, her voice dropping into a hiss. Remember your mentor's workshop. The room grew instantly cold. There it was, the old rusty chain they used to drag me around. But this time, it was attached to nothing. I smiled softly. Don't worry. I remember my exact place. It is usually where your leverage comes to die. My uncle's face turned dark purple. You ungrateful little. I stood up, adjusting my velvet gloves. Careful. Harrison is waiting right outside. He has 3 legal teams, 40 armed guards, and the emotional restraint of a sniper when irritated. Genevieve let out a bitter laugh. You actually think he loves you? He doesn't even know who you truly are. I leaned down, meeting her gaze directly. Oh, Genevieve. That is easily the funniest joke you've told all year. By the time I returned to the carriage, Harrison already knew every detail. Mind reading wasn't even required when Nora had transmitted the audio directly to his pocket device. Still, the moment I sat opposite him, his eyes searched mine intensely. You're trembling, he said softly. I am not trembling, Harrison. I am furious. There is a distinct technical difference. He reached his hand out, pausing inches away, asking permission without speaking a word. I placed my gloved hand firmly in his. His long fingers closed around mine with deliberate warmth. The Grand Guild Gala took place 2 weeks later. My uncle had insisted on hosting it months ago, back when he still believed Harrison's influence would rescue his bankrupt trading company. Harrison allowed the event to proceed for one single reason: my stage was set. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, high magistrates, wealthy merchants, press writers, and social vultures who had once called me the cheap dockside copy behind their wine glasses. Victoria arrived in midnight blue silk and kissed my cheek warmly. Remember, darling, if they start weeping when the truth drops, let them. Tears are merely applause with extra salt. Nora adjusted the tiny projection key hidden inside my evening clutch. Screens are active. Backups are secured. If anyone tries to touch you, I will ruin their lineage professionally and emotionally. Harrison looked down at me, his dark eyes steady. Ready, Corinne? I smiled. Inside my head, my thoughts were strangely, beautifully quiet. Let's return the wrong sister. The formal program began with my uncle taking the podium, delivering a nauseating speech about family honor and traditional values. Naturally, men who traded their nieces loved grand speeches about bloodlines. Then the grand doors burst open. Genevieve walked into the ballroom clad in pure white lace. Gasps rippled through the crowd like spilt wine. She looked frail, tragic, radiant, the stolen victim returning from mysterious exile. Behind her shuffled my aunt, dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Genevieve marched straight toward the main dais. I am deeply sorry. Her voice trembled with magnificent theatrical precision. I can no longer remain silent. That woman standing beside the chief magistrate is not Genevieve. She is my twin sister, Corinne. She stole my name, my position, and my husband while I was recovering from an illness. The entire ballroom erupted into chaos. Journalists scrambled forward. High society lords turned toward Harrison, eagerly waiting for the cold, rigid magistrate to discard the impostor. Harrison took one deliberate step forward. His voice echoed through the high ceilings, cutting through the noise like steel. I know. The entire room froze in place. Genevieve's tragic expression shattered. What? Harrison's eyes never left her face. I have known she is Corinne for months. I stepped right up beside him, my head held high. Yes, I took her place. But I was never the thief in this house. I was simply the receipt your family forgot to burn. Nora clicked the hidden remote. The grand wall screens lit up instantly, displaying Genevieve's original handwritten departure note in high resolution. I'd rather jump into the harbor than marry that cold machine. Let Corinne do it. She was born to be useful. When I return, she can fade back into the background. A violent wave of whispers rushed through the aristocratic crowd. Genevieve went pale as chalk. The next slide appeared: financial logs from my uncle's private bank accounts, direct transfers from Genevieve's allowance straight to my uncle's debt accounts. Expensive luxury purchases under my aunt's name. Corinne's tiny spending record beneath it: standard bread, basic tools, workshop lease tax. A noblewoman in the front row gasped aloud. They stripped her of everything. I offered the room a razor-sharp smile. You sold me off as a replacement, treated me like a servant, dressed me like a trophy, and now you have the audacity to call me a fraud? Please, at least afford the villain-accurate accounting. Victoria let out a single, loud laugh that sounded like an empress signing an arrest warrant. Next came the forged legal papers, swapped signatures, altered identity documents, and private contracts promising my mentor's workshop to my uncle's firm. Nora had even unearthed an audio recording from Genevieve's coach journey. If Harrison stays cold, Corinne can keep him. If he turns out to be useful and wealthy, I'll take my life back whenever I please. Genevieve lunged toward the projection panel. Turn it off. Stop it. Not a single soul moved to assist her. My uncle tried to rush the stage, his face contorted. Corinne, that is enough. We are your family. I looked down at him. Once, that stern voice used to make my blood run cold. Now it sounded like a broken latch on a door I had already left behind. Family? I asked quietly. No. I was your spare part. Don't demand tears from the spare part when the main engine collapses. His face twisted in helpless rage. My aunt began sobbing hysterically, burying her face in her hands. We only wanted to preserve our standing. You preserved Genevieve's vanity using my entire life as collateral, I said flatly. Genevieve turned frantically to Harrison, tears streaming down her face. Harrison, please. She manipulated you. I was frightened before, but I am here now. I am the woman you were legally contracted to marry. Harrison looked at her with the absolute indifference he usually reserved for expired court filings. No, I never knew you. I fell in love with the woman you consider disposable. A quiet collective sigh rose from the crowd. Genevieve stumbled backward, her knees buckling. You left your life on the floor and told me to sweep it up, I told her softly. I simply decided to keep the room. By the end of the evening, my uncle's primary business partners had publicly severed all trade contracts. Harrison's legal division formally served notices of grand fraud and identity extortion. High court auditors froze every account linked to the stolen transfers. The forged marriage registers triggered a full criminal inquiry. My aunt lost her social invitations before the dessert courses were even served. Genevieve lost her patrons, her pristine reputation, and the last thread of her polished persona. Victoria approached my aunt with a smile so sharp it could cut through stone. You attempted to sell Corinne to my son as a counterfeit, yet you were foolish enough to leave a complete paper trail. I almost admire the sheer incompetence. After the gala, Harrison escorted me out to the quiet, moonlit terrace. My feet ached. My face was tired from smiling. My heart felt like it had survived a violent sea storm and was thoroughly annoyed about the structural damage. He handed me a leather-bound folder. I opened it under the faint lantern light. Divorce papers. For one terrifying second, my brain went completely silent. Of course. The grand lie was over. So was the arrangement. I nodded once, keeping my composure. Very efficient. Harrison's dark eyes focused on me. Read the following page. I flipped the parchment over. A brand new marriage contract, drafted under my authentic name, Corinne. No family debt attached. No fraudulent titles. No legal claim from my uncle. Complete financial independence for my mentor's workshop, a private restoration fund, and total freedom to walk away whenever I wished. Or total freedom to stay. My fingers trembled against the heavy paper. Harrison stood remarkably still. This ends the deception. I do not want Genevieve's replacement. I want Corinne. The woman who insults my tailoring in her head, steals my pastries, threatens my authority, and somehow became the only honest soul in my world. My throat tightened. Don't cry. Crying in front of high magistrates only encourages them. The corner of his mouth curved up slightly. Still remarkably loud. I swallowed hard, signing the annulment papers first. I needed to know he would let me go if I asked. When the fake marriage was officially dead, I picked up the new contract. If I choose you now, I said, looking up into his eyes, it is not because my family sold me. I know. It isn't because you cleared my debts. I know. And it isn't simply because you look incredible in a tailored coat. His brow arched. Only partly? I sighed softly. Mostly because you survived every unfiltered thought in my head and chose to stay. Then I signed my real name in dark ink, Corinne. The strange telepathic link began fading over the following months. Harrison frowned at me across the breakfast table one morning. What are you thinking right now? I offered a sly smile. Wouldn't you like to know? It seems your illegal mental wiretap has finally expired. Unfortunate for you. Now you'll have to guess my mood like an ordinary, emotionally guarded husband. He leaned back in his chair, a rare, genuine smile breaking across his face. Or I will simply have to ask you directly. Several months later, I married Harrison Vance again, this time publicly, as Corinne. Victoria wept only once, briefly threatening a press photographer who tried to capture the moment. Nora served as my maid of honor, whispering that she had secured 3 escape boats just in case. My old mentor sat in the front row, healthy, proud, and fully funded. Harrison no longer needed to read my mind. He had learned how to listen. My uncle and aunt spent the next year drowning in bankruptcy, lawsuits, and public humiliation. High society completely erased them from guest lists. Genevieve ended up residing in a modest rented cottage in the outer provinces, posting dramatic letters that nobody bothered to read. I did not forgive them. Forgiveness was not rent I owed to people who had built their comfort on my pain. At the final Judicial Guild Assembly of the year, I walked into the grand hall right beside Harrison. Reporters swarmed the steps. Mrs. Vance, what do you say to those who claim you usurped your sister's life? I turned to the press cameras, holding my head high. I didn't usurp her life. I survived it. Harrison leaned down, his dark eyes warm with affection. Was that your diplomatic answer? Yes, I whispered back. My honest answer would require legal immunity. He laughed a low, genuine sound and kissed me right in front of the crowd. They gave me her name to keep me quiet. I gave it back, claimed my own, and made the whole world listen. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful to her family? Comment justice below. If the ending was perfect, leave a comment with your thoughts. If you wanted an even colder revenge, your comments will decide how ruthless our next story will be. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next full story.